Hey everyone, in today's video I'm gonna break down week 1 of Peter Hahn's dynamic figure class. So I'm currently enrolled in the class and I want to do a series of videos where I go through what we learned every week. So I'm gonna go through what I learned, kind of the notes that I took in that class, the drawings that I did, so that if you're interested you can have a more informed decision as to whether or not the class is the right fit for you. I'm enjoying it. So far we're in week 2, towards the end of week 2 at the moment, and I'm learning a lot. I want to say that this is not a beginner class. You have to be familiar with the figure, at least to some extent, because the way Peter goes through is as he draws, you kind of need to be familiar with a bit of the anatomy and landmarks and things of that sort. You don't have to be an expert at the figure by any means, but I wouldn't put it as like a complete beginner class. If you're a complete beginner and want to learn the figure, taking something else might be better. Having said that, watching these videos might help you understand what you need to prepare for and what you should learn before getting into it. And if you're more intermediate or advanced, this might give you a better idea of what you're going to learn, because really the point of this class is to push the figure into being more dynamic. Think of how Disney animators push and pull things, comic artists push and pull things. You have dynamic poses and dynamic positions that you don't necessarily get in classical training. Also, the idea of manipulating reference. So if you have a reference and the figure is looking at you at a certain position, how can you manipulate it so that you are looking at it from a different angle and drawing it from a different angle, from a more powerful dynamic position, pushing the foreshortening, things of that sort. Having said that, let's get into the drawings. So I'm going to show you my drawings over here. These are basically notes that I took from the class. And it starts basically with a simple breakdown of the figure from the front and from the back. The way Peter approaches it is he has this idea of the two squares stacked on top of each other. And from there, you can start to build the figure. For example, for the male figure, once you have the two squares established, you start to add the lats, you add the pecs on top, you add this rhythm for the traps, and then you can add the rhythms for the obliques. And once you have this basic two-square approach, it becomes easier to locate things and find the landmarks and find the different distances and proportions that you're looking for. The same idea with the back, where you have this simple manta ray kind of shape, as Peter likes to call it, for the traps. You've got just a couple of circles to indicate where the scapula is going to be. The whole idea of this, here you've got the erector spinae, I believe it's called, like the muscles that erect the spine going into the coccyx. And it's just all simplified so that you can start to commit things to memory. When you contrast it with the female figure, he also has the two-square approach over here, but he cuts into the lats and then he flares the waist in order to create that hourglass figure. Looking at it from the back, it's kind of the same approach. How do you simplify the figure into a design that looks good, but also is easy to commit to memory? Then he starts to get into what, the pillow essentially. And you'll see the pillow used a lot in like Disney animation. They talk about it a lot. I think, what was his name? The Vilpo manual. Glenn Vilpo talks about the pillow or the bean a lot. The pillow and the bean are kind of two sides of the same coin, really. The idea of being, you've got, the pillow helps you understand a stretch and a pinch. So if you imagine that this is kind of a pillow, the corners being over here, then if the figure is kind of twisted or pinching on one side and stretching on the other, you can start to envision the creases as like maybe this is where the lat is and where the creases of the different muscles are starting to show up. And once you have the pillow, then you can start to stack and add the different elements of the anatomy in a much simpler way. You can see like it's so simple, like the abs are indicated with a circle. The obliques are indicated with this, kind of following the side plane of the body and then going into the connection to the abs. Then, these are kind of understanding the pillow or the bean or the even a simplified, to a certain extent, a simplified cylinder. So he gives you an exercise where you take some reference and you simplify the figure, omitting all the details and just trying to understand it in this pillow format. Here I'm trying to just explore them without using reference. And here we jump into the head. So this is really cool. This is kind of Peter's interpretation of a simplified head. And you'll see a lot of it can be taken from the Loomis approach, where you've got this circle over here, the rhythm on the side of the head, connecting to the eye socket, connecting to the cheekbones, and then down to the rhythm of the muzzle. You know, the eyes are simplified into this shape over here, understanding the bridge of the nose and where it comes out. And what he really wants you to do is sort of be able to draw this and envision it and see it from different angles in this really cool chart. The reason you want to simplify it is you really want to commit it to memory. Once you commit it to memory, then you can start to play around and design in a really cool way. These are some more notes from the class, and this is where he starts to integrate the connection of the head to the torso. It's kind of funny because Peter starts with the torso as his main thing that he looks for, and then he attaches the head on top. He considers the head to be just like any of the other limbs, you know, the hands, the feet. Whereas the way I learned it is always the head first and then the torso. To me, I still like the head and then the torso approach as opposed to Peter's. Maybe it's because I've been just doing it for so long, but it makes more sense to me when I'm looking at the gesture of the human body to start with the head. It's just so important for me to understand the gesture. And even in the approach that we learned in dynamic sketching, if you watch that video, he talks about the idea of the balloon and string, and then you add the different parts of the animal. This can be the torso of the animal, this can be the hips of the animal, the tail comes, and then you connect the rest of the limbs. So, you know, starting with the head is kind of the same idea over here. The way he thinks about it is, you know, this is the biggest mass, and then everything else comes out of it, which is fair, and I can understand that approach. And, you know, as long as it works, who cares? You know, he encourages you to use whatever works for you. But in this page, he's focusing on the connection of the head to the torso, the sternocleidomastoid, the traps. So now we start talking about the connection of the head to the torso. This was a study that Peter did based on a reference that was there. Again, kind of explaining how to simplify things. Instead of looking for every detail in that reference, how do we break it down into its simplest components using the design that we have over here? So instead of trying to look for all the details, you know, I don't have any details of the abs or anything like that, just implement this design into the reference and try to draw it that way. This is where I started to kind of play around with trying to figure out my own design, and Peter encourages you to do that because all of us come into this class from a different background, and we understand the head and anatomy in a different way, and you solve your art problems based on the way that you like to solve problems and the way that you like to think. And I have a lot of background in studying from, you know, the Riley rhythms, Loomis, the Watts atelier. So here I was trying to play around and just kind of find my own design, you know, using some of the Riley rhythms over here, using some of the classic Loomis stuff, trying to find out, okay, for example, I was also trying to take a look at the Asaro head, and the Asaro head has an awesome triangle over here, which indicates the change in plane in the cheekbone. So I'm trying to incorporate it here, trying to figure out a more feminine design for women, and just kind of trying to play around with it. And then that chart that we took a look at earlier meant my design into that chart and trying to commit it to memory. I would say I was able to like get this 90% from memory, but you know, a few issues I ran into were, for example, here you see that the rhythm over here, like this jaw is protruding out, whereas it should be protruding in a little bit. You know, I got it better over here on this side. This is kind of Peter's critique of encouraging me to push things further. but I'm happy with the way that the design turned out, just as an aesthetic design. Here, I'm taking a look at Peter's breakdown again, because I wanted to use it as a baseline to design my own over here. So, I added kind of the rhythm of the serratus. You'll see here the flaring of the lats, and just adding a lot of my understanding of the figure based on what I studied from, Watts, using the Riley method, incorporating Peter's two-square approach. I really like that for landmarking, the square over here, the square over here, going all the way down to the groin and attaching the head to it. Here I tried to do it, I think, in Peter's method, where he had the torso first and then attach the head to it, and I had a lot of trouble, doing it. It's just I understand it head first and then torso. Again, which is fine. And I'm trying to find a balance between something that looks cool and complex, but is easy for me to memorize, because I have a tendency to like really overcomplicate things. If you look at, for example, the Riley rhythms over here, well, these are more of Jeff Watts rhythms based on Frank Riley. I really like the design, but I'm trying to create my own. And, this is way more complex than what Peter has. But playing with designs is really cool. And here I actually used the Watts on Bridgman book, which I absolutely recommend. This book over here, it basically takes Bridgman's drawings and cleans them up for you. So then you can really start to take this stuff and add it to your drawings. You can see how you can follow the rhythms over here. You can follow the rhythms and create a simplified version. Really, really like this book. Absolutely recommend it. And even in this drawing, I referenced it quite a bit. So I was happy with the way this design came out. And then again, I kind of tried to do the same thing with taking Peter's and then adding my own design, adding some of the Riley rhythms, doing the same thing with the female, and then applying it to figure drawing. So these are done from reference. The idea is either to use Peter's design or your design to figure out, okay, how can I implement this into drawing from reference or drawing from life? So using kind of the approach that he taught us in dynamic sketching a little bit, of first trying to sketch things out, figure them out, the thumbnailing process in a way, just to tease things out and figure them out, and then once you have a better understanding, implementing them into a figure drawing. So this was a drawing I actually ran into trouble with, because you'll see that I have the rhythm here of the pecs, whereas the body is actually going, like if you have cross contour lines, it's going in that direction, and I don't have it really drawn in that way. This turned out to be better. Again, figuring things out with the thumbnailing approach first, and then trying to implement my own design and my own connections. And you'll see like we're only drawing the torso and the head over here. Just torso and head, because every week we're going to stack on different parts of the anatomy. For example, week 2, what we're doing right now, which I'll do another video of once I'm done, is arms and legs, and then connecting the arms and legs to the torso. Here, the same approach with the female figure, breaking it down into simple forms, doing the thumbnailing first, where I'm figuring out, okay, what do I need to exaggerate? What do I need to move? I like the way this drawing turned out. It's a little messy, it needs to be cleaned up, but you'll see I'm using Riley rhythms in addition to like whatever I understood from Peter. This one I just went full Riley. Not a fan of the way the rib cage connects to the hips, but I like overall that my design is starting to be implemented into these drawings. And the one thing that I'm worried about is my design is a little more complicated, but I like the fact that Peter's is simple, so I can fall back into that if I run into trouble. But yeah, this was week 1. Kind of a refresher week in a way, getting into the rhythm of things, understanding the head in its basic way, understanding the torso in a more basic way, basic anatomy, and then building on top of that. So there you have it. This is what we have for week 1. I hope you guys enjoyed this short video. And once I'm done with week 2, I'll do a week 2 video all the way up to week 8. And then at the end, I think I might do kind of a comprehensive video giving you my overall opinions of the class. I made another video about dynamic sketching if you're interested in seeing that, the dynamic sketching class by Peter Hahn. I went through the full 8 weeks and gave you kind of a breakdown of what we did in that class. Anyways, I'm done with this one, and I'll see you in the next video.